The Earth of the 23rd century was a shadow of what it had once been. The scars of humanity's reckless past were visible everywhere. Cities once glittering with progress lay in ruins, their skylines reduced to skeletal remnants of steel and glass. The oceans, poisoned by centuries of industrial waste, had reclaimed vast stretches of land, and the atmosphere still clung to the remnants of a war-torn age. The world was divided, fractured by greed, by fear, and by the shadows of a long, brutal history. Yet in the silence that followed the final wars of Earth, there was an odd kind of peace. A fragile coalition of nations had emerged from the ashes, their leaders promising to rebuild, but their promises were whispered and uncertain. In the depths of this uncertainty, the human race had turned its attention inward, focused on survival, and turned its back on the stars. Space exploration, once the pinnacle of human achievement, had slowed to a crawl. The great space agencies had collapsed, leaving only a handful of researchers and astronomers left to track the movement of distant stars, as if hoping to glimpse a brighter future. But those glimmers of hope were few, and Earth's people had forgotten what it was like to dream of the vastness beyond their planet. The cosmos, once a source of fascination, now felt like a cruel reminder of humanity's lost potential. And then the message came. The first signal was nothing extraordinary at first, just a fleeting burst of static from a deep space probe that had been lost for years. But when the transmission repeated, and the words became clear, it was unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. A message of desperation, of panic. "They're here," it read. It wasn't a plea for help. It was a warning. The transmission came from the edge of the solar system, far beyond the last traces of human exploration. The probe, launched by a desperate scientific initiative decades before, had ventured into the unexplored depths, its mission simple: gather data, push the boundaries of human knowledge. But its fate was different. In its final moments, the probe had encountered something or someone, something alien, and it had sent one last message back to Earth, warning of an enemy humanity had never imagined. Within days, every government on Earth was aware of the signal, but none knew what to make of it. Was it a hoax, a glitch in the transmission, or was there, at last, an answer to the greatest mystery of human existence, an alien race, vast and powerful, on the brink of arriving? In a darkened room beneath the surface of the United Nations headquarters, world leaders met in emergency session. The message was brief but profound. One sentence stood out: "They have found you." The room fell into stunned silence. The implications were unimaginable. Outside, the world held its breath. Earth's fragile governments, barely hanging together after centuries of strife, struggled to formulate a response. Was it an attack? A first contact? Was the galaxy about to reach out, only to pull away, leaving humanity lost in the darkness of space once again? And then, as if confirming every doubt, the stars themselves answered. A massive craft appeared in Earth's orbit, a ship so vast it blotted out the sky. It wasn't human, of course. Its sleek surface reflected nothing but the cold emptiness of space, and from it, a voice, cool, calculated, and utterly alien, spoke to Earth. "We are the Galactic Concord. You are now under our observation. Your species has been deemed a potential threat." The words rang out across the globe. Potential threat. The message was clear. Earth was not just being observed. It was being watched. And worse, humanity's very existence had become a danger in the eyes of those who had already conquered the stars. The countdown to humanity's reckoning had begun. The Concorde arrived as shadows in the sky. Massive, imposing, and utterly alien, their ships hovered just outside Earth's atmosphere, silent as the moon. They were a race that had already witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, ruthless and cold, with no room for the unproven or the weak. In their eyes, Earth was a planet too dangerous to be left unchecked, but too insignificant to be feared. Yet, The first diplomatic delegation to land was nothing like the welcoming parties humanity had once imagined. Gone were the idealized depictions of peaceful, wise beings, extending a hand of friendship. Instead, the Concord's emissaries were cold, mechanical, their skin like polished metal, their eyes glowing with an intelligence so advanced it felt almost predatory. The world watched in silence as the Concorde ship descended upon the United Nations headquarters. It landed without fanfare, without warning. Simply appeared, dominating the skyline as if it had always been there. The delegation disembarked in perfect unison, their movements calculated, precise. They had arrived not to greet humanity, but to place an ultimatum before it. The leader of the Concorde delegation, an entity that referred to itself only as Athos, spoke in a voice that echoed with artificial precision, yet a cold tone that left no room for negotiation. "Earth," it began, "your species has been observed for the past century. You are not worthy of the stars." A hush fell over the representatives from Earth. Some stood tall, defiant, ready to argue. Others trembled, their minds reeling with the weight of what was happening. The world's governments had prepared for many things: a peaceful exploration, a first contact, perhaps even an alliance. But they had never imagined this: an alien race simply showing up and declaring their supremacy. Athos continued, "Your world, fractured by war and suffering, has shown no sign of progress. Yet your potential is undeniable. You are dangerous in your unpredictability, your violence. It is a threat that cannot be allowed to grow." The alien paused, its glowing eyes scanning the gathered leaders. "You will submit to the Galactic Concord. You will be integrated into the Order, and your fate will be determined by us. Alternatively, you will be destroyed, and your species erased from the galactic record." The ultimatum hung in the air like a noose, suffocating and final. To many, it was a death sentence, but to some, the words sparked something else: a fierce, deep-rooted defiance. At first, the leaders of Earth seemed frozen, unable to comprehend the sheer scale of what they were being offered, or threatened with. Would they truly surrender? After all, how could they fight an enemy that was so far beyond their understanding? The world's response came swiftly, at least from the most vocal among them. The president of the United Earth Coalition, standing on the steps of the UN building, addressed the world in a live broadcast. The silence before her speech was deafening, as if the entire planet was holding its breath. Her voice, though trembling with the weight of the moment, carried the quiet fire of a people unwilling to bend. "If you wanted sheep, you picked the wrong planet," she declared. "We will not kneel to you. We will never submit." The Concorde's emissary responded with icy indifference, as if humanity's response was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Then you will face extinction." The broadcast cut to static as the Concorde ships began to retreat into the sky. Earth's refusal had been marked. The message sent: there would be no further talks, no second chances. But for the first time in a century, Earth's people had a reason to hope. The Concorde's arrogance had given them something precious: time. Time to prepare. Time to fight. Time to prove the stars wrong. As the Concorde ships disappeared into the heavens, a new rallying cry began to spread across the planet, whispered by those who refused to surrender. "We are not the ones who will fall." Humanity's war for survival had just begun. The silence after the Concorde's departure was heavy, but it was not one of defeat. On the contrary, it was a moment of reckoning for the people of Earth, one that would awaken the deep, primal resolve buried within humanity. The Galactic Concorde's ultimatum had ignited something far stronger than fear. It sparked the fires of defiance. Within hours of the broadcast, governments scrambled to assess the damage. The Concorde ships had not fired a single shot, yet their presence had left an indelible scar. The nations of Earth, already strained by years of war and economic ruin, now faced an enemy whose power was beyond comprehension. But this was not a people who bowed easily. They had survived the end of their own civilization. They had rebuilt after nuclear winters and environmental collapses. If they could survive that, they could survive anything. In the heart of the United Earth Coalition's command center, military strategists and top scientists gathered to assess the gravity of the situation. Earth had no starships to speak of, no fleets of advanced vessels to challenge the Concorde's dominance in space. Their weapons were primitive by galactic standards, their tech lagging far behind. But there was one thing the Concorde had not counted on: humanity's ingenuity. At first, it was small acts of resistance. A former naval officer, now a mechanic in a forgotten hangar, used alien signal interference technology from the Concorde's transmissions to hack into a satellite. The military's encrypted networks went down for an entire hour. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a message to the world. We can disrupt them. We can fight back. Soon, others began following suit. A retired engineer from Russia created a rudimentary EMP weapon that disabled a dozen Concorde drones in orbit. A rogue hacker collective from Brazil infiltrated Concorde communication lines and sent cryptic messages back to Earth, offering insight into the aliens' technological weaknesses. The government was slow to respond, too burdened by the weight of their own uncertainty. But the people, they had no such hesitation. In the underground resistance groups, there was no question. They had been waiting for this moment, watching as their world fell apart piece by piece. Now the enemy was here, and they would not wait to be slaughtered. They would strike. And they would strike first. By the time the Concorde's reinforcements arrived in Earth's orbit, enormous ships that would dwarf anything humanity had ever seen, Earth was ready to offer a fight. The resistance movement had secretly commandeered a portion of Earth's space fleet, cobbled together from old military remnants. They weren't sleek or fast, but they were vicious. The first counterattack came from an unexpected source: a crew of civilian pilots who, using stolen Concorde tech and human ingenuity, launched a daring raid on an alien command ship. Using primitive but effective tactics, they disabled the Concorde vessel's energy core. It exploded in a massive fireball that shook the heavens. It was a small victory, but it was enough to send shockwaves through the galaxy. The Concorde had underestimated humanity's resourcefulness. They had believed Earth would fall into submission, not rise in rebellion. In the aftermath of the battle, a battered yet triumphant group of human survivors stood in the wreckage of the Concorde ship. One pilot, a former college professor, now turned leader of the resistance, looked up at the stars and whispered, "We've shown them we can fight. We've shown them what happens when you underestimate us." The message was clear. Earth had no intention of lying down and dying. They would fight until their last breath. The fire had been lit, and it would not be extinguished. As word of the first human victory spread, the oppressed alien races who had long suffered under the Concorde's rule began to take notice. Whispers of Earth's resilience and defiance began to circulate in the far corners of the galaxy. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity's rise could be more than just survival. It could be the spark that ignited a revolution across the stars. The Concorde had expected humanity to break under their first strike. They had calculated that a species like Earth's, fractured, devastated by centuries of warfare, would cower at the mere presence of the galactic order. They were wrong. Humanity had done more than fight back. They had shown the galaxy something its rulers had long forgotten: the capacity for pure, relentless ingenuity when backed into a corner. The battle of the Concorde flagship, Tyrannus, had been a turning point. Earth's ragtag fleet, a collection of salvaged vessels, civilian craft, and military relics, had faced off against the might of the alien invaders, equipped with technology that defied human understanding. But Earth's pilots, engineers, and hackers, each one a product of a world that had learned to survive against the odds, had taken on the impossible. Using alien schematics stolen from the wreckage of Tyrannus, they had developed hybrid technology that turned the tide. One by one, Earth's ships launched into space, outfitted with makeshift cloaking devices, quantum disruptors, and weapons derived from alien data. No longer would they be content with mere survival. Humanity was learning, adapting, and evolving faster than any of the Concord had predicted. As their first major victory echoed across the galaxy, Earth's resistance was no longer just a nuisance. It was a growing threat, one that the Concord could not ignore. And the more they learned about humanity, the more they realized the truth. Earth was not like the other species they had conquered. An intelligence officer within the Concord, known only as Lornak, had been tasked with studying humanity's patterns. What made them different? Why were they so unpredictable, so difficult to anticipate? It was in the analysis of a single human trait that Lornak found the key to understanding Earth. Humans were unbound by the constraints of logic that governed every other species in the galaxy. Where other species relied on clear protocols, rigid tactics, and predictable thinking, humans thought in wild, chaotic bursts. It was a kind of madness, a refusal to follow the rules that every other race had learned to live by. And it made them dangerous. No matter how advanced the Concord's technology, no matter how superior their weapons, they could not account for the unpredictable nature of human thinking. This was not lost on the human leaders who, in secret war rooms beneath the surface of Earth's moons, were already planning their next moves. They knew they could not face the Concord head-on with brute force alone. So they did the only thing they knew how to do. They'd fought dirty. They exploited every weakness, every loophole in the Concord systems. They used psychological warfare, planting false intel, and triggering panic among the alien invaders. Earth's hackers infiltrated alien networks, spreading misinformation and causing widespread confusion. But it wasn't just the human mind that was at work here. Humanity had something the Concord never anticipated: willpower. Even after suffering countless losses, human resilience never wavered. The resistance didn't simply fight to survive. They fought to prove something to the galaxy. That Earth, despite everything, was still standing, and it was more than capable of tearing down the stars if need be. One such mission, led by a former astronaut, now a seasoned resistance commander, captured an entire alien patrol ship. The crew, experts in human warfare, had turned the ship into a weapon of their own. They used its advanced tech to hack into the Concord's communication network, sending a message back to their homeworld. This is not your galaxy anymore. We are Earth. We are the ones you will never understand. The Concord, realizing that their most powerful weapon was no longer their fleet, turned to desperation. They issued a warning to all races in the galaxy. Humanity must be extinguished before their madness spreads. The galaxy is not prepared for the terror they will unleash. The truth was, the Concord had underestimated Earth's potential. They thought humanity was fractured, weak. But now, with every victory, every desperate counterattack, humanity had revealed its true power: the ability to take on the impossible, to adapt and survive in ways the galaxy could never predict. The real war was just beginning, and Earth was no longer content to fight for survival. It was fighting for a future of its own making. The battle for Earth had only just begun, but already the tides of war had started to shift. Humanity's resistance had not only proven itself on the battlefield, but it had also sparked a fire across the galaxy. Whispers of Earth's defiance spread to the farthest corners of the universe, reaching planets where the inhabitants had long lived in the iron grip of the Concord's oppressive rule. On the fringes of known space, in the decaying prisons of the Concord, oppressed alien species began to listen. For years, they had been forced into servitude, their worlds enslaved by the Concord's superior technology. Many had resigned themselves to their fate, believing that the Galactic Empire would last forever. But Earth's audacity, its willingness to stand and fight against a force that seemed invincible, stirred something deep within these captive species: hope. A hidden network of resistance leaders, disparate groups who had been silently opposing the Concord in their own corners of the galaxy, began to make contact with Earth's forces. One such contact came from a telepathic race known as the Corel, whose homeworld had been annexed by the Concord centuries ago. Their people were used as little more than mind slaves, their powers exploited to control other species. But now, a small faction of Corel survivors, aided by an underground movement of their own, had begun to break free. The human resistance, led by their most trusted commanders, saw an opportunity. If they could unite these oppressed species, if they could form a true galactic alliance, the Concord might finally be overthrown. Earth could lead not just a rebellion, but an insurrection that would reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. A daring rescue mission was organized. A covert strike against a Concord prison facility located on the barren moon of Charon 6. The prison held thousands of enslaved aliens, including a revered Corel historian named Alia, whose knowledge of Concord tactics and weaknesses was invaluable. The mission was high risk. Earth's fledgling fleet was small, and the enemy's forces had grown increasingly aggressive. But there was no turning back. The prisoners were humanity's potential allies, and they needed to be freed. The operation was launched under the cover of darkness, with human and alien forces working together in an unorthodox blend of guerrilla tactics and space-age technology. The ground assault was led by a human commander, Major Elena Brooks, a decorated military officer turned resistance leader, whose experience in high-risk operations made her the perfect candidate for the mission. Elena's team, accompanied by a small group of Corel and other alien rebels, infiltrated the prison complex, sabotaging the security systems and freeing hundreds of prisoners along the way. It was a brutal, bloody operation, and casualties mounted on both sides, but the will of the oppressed races proved stronger than the might of their captors. Inside the prison, Elena and her team finally reached Alia, who was imprisoned in a damp, dimly lit cell. Despite the Corel's long history of torment, Alia greeted them with a quiet strength, her telepathic powers a glimmer of light in the darkness. She knew the significance of the mission and was more than ready to join the cause. "You've awoken the sleeping giants of the galaxy," she said. "Now, we must strike while the iron is hot." The escape was a success. The prisoners were liberated, but their victory was more than just a tactical gain. It was the beginning of something much larger, a true intergalactic uprising. As Alia and her newfound allies were transported to Earth's command center, they shared critical intelligence with the human resistance. The Concord's control over the galaxy was not as absolute as it appeared. There were weaknesses, cracks in their infrastructure, and those cracks could be exploited. But even as they celebrated their victory, a new threat emerged. The Concord, recognizing the growing resistance, had unleashed their most terrifying weapon yet, a race of bioengineered soldiers, bred for one purpose: to exterminate any and all forms of rebellion. The galaxy's fate now hung in the balance. The Concord would stop at nothing to crush the growing insurgency, but humanity and its new allies were more determined than ever to fight back. With Earth at the helm, and the forces of the oppressed rising behind them, the battle for the future of the stars was about to escalate in ways no one could have predicted. In the face of overwhelming odds, Earth's message was clear. We are not just fighting for survival. We are fighting for freedom. For every enslaved race, for every fallen world. And together, we will take back the stars. The news of the Concord's new weapon spread like wildfire through the resistance networks. The bioengineered soldiers, known as the Exarax, were a nightmare made flesh. They were faster, stronger, and more lethal than anything humanity or its allies had ever faced. These creatures were the apex of Concord cruelty, genetically modified to hunt, kill, and destroy with unwavering precision. Their skin was like polished obsidian, their eyes glowing with an eerie blood-red light. They had no mercy. They had no fear. They were designed for one purpose: annihilation. The first encounter with the Exarax came as a shock to the resistance. On a planet far from Earth, Varnus 9, a key rebel stronghold, the Exarax were deployed with terrifying efficiency. The planet's surface was scorched by the relentless assault of the creatures, and even the most seasoned soldiers were overwhelmed by their sheer ferocity. Entire cities were razed in a matter of hours, and the resistance forces, despite their best efforts, could do little but retreat into the wilderness. It was a crushing blow. The loss of Varnus 9 sent ripples of fear through the galaxy. The Exarax were not just soldiers. They were monsters, and the human resistance realized they were facing an enemy unlike any other. If the Concord could mass-produce these creatures, the rebellion would stand little chance of survival. But humanity, driven by an undying will to survive, did not despair. They had faced impossible odds before, and every time, they had found a way to prevail. In the aftermath of the loss of Varnus 9, the leaders of the resistance convened on Earth's moon, now a hidden hub of military operations. Commander Elena Brooks stood at the front, her eyes burning with a determination forged in the fires of countless battles. The Exarax are the Concord's last card, she declared to the council. If we let them control the battlefield with these monsters, we lose. But if we learn how to defeat them, we can break the back of the Concord. The Corel historian Elia, now an invaluable part of the human resistance, shared vital information that had been passed down from her people's archives. According to the Corel, the Exarax were not invincible. Their genetic modifications, while making them formidable, also left them with weaknesses that could be exploited. Their neural systems are highly sensitive to electromagnetic pulses, Elia explained. If we can disrupt their communication and coordination, we might be able to destabilize their ranks. The resistance quickly mobilized, rallying the newly allied forces from across the galaxy. The first step was to find a way to counter the Exarax's neural dominance. They needed a weapon, one that could disable the bioengineered soldiers without destroying the entire planet. The answer came from an unlikely source. A group of human engineers, working alongside the Corel, managed to reverse engineer one of the Concord's communication devices, creating a prototype of a powerful electromagnetic pulse weapon capable of disabling the Exarax. It wasn't perfect, and time was running out. The Concord's relentless assault on the resistance had only intensified, and Earth's forces knew the clock was ticking. But there was one final, crucial piece of the plan that would give humanity a fighting chance. A coordinated strike on the Concord's central command hub, the heart of their operations. The resistance knew that if they could hit the source of the Exarax's control, they might be able to sever the creature's connection to their masters and render them useless. With the pulse weapon in hand, the human fleet, bolstered by Corel, Varnusian, and other alien allies, prepared for the most daring mission of all. The target, the Xarax Station, a massive Concord structure floating in the deep void of space, where the Exarax were being bred and deployed. The plan was simple but dangerous. Infiltrate the station, plant the EMP device, and escape before the Exarax and the full might of the Concord fleet could respond. As the fleet entered the station's orbit, the Exarax were already waiting. Their glowing red eyes scanned the stars, and in their cold, calculating minds, they sensed the impending attack. But humanity's forces had a secret weapon. The Corel telepaths could block the Exarax's sensory connection, allowing the human soldiers to move unseen. The resistance struck in the dead of night, catching the alien defenders off guard. The battle that ensued was brutal. The Exarax swarmed like locusts, tearing through resistance lines with savage precision. But humanity had come prepared. The EMP device was activated, sending a wave of disruption through the Exarax's neural networks. One by one, the creatures faltered, their movements growing erratic, their coordination shattered. It was a fragile victory, but a victory nonetheless. The Exarax, now incapacitated, were no longer the unstoppable force they had been. The Concord had lost their weapon of terror. The galaxy watched as the first signs of victory appeared on the horizon. Humanity, against all odds, had taken the first step toward breaking the Concord's stranglehold on the stars. And they weren't stopping there. The rebellion was now poised to strike back with all the fury and passion of a species that had never known how to quit. With the fall of the Exarax, a new wave of hope surged through the galaxy. Humanity, emboldened by its unexpected victory, had proven that it was no longer the prey. It was the hunter. The resistance movement, which had started as small factions fighting for survival, now transformed into a unified force, ready to wage full-scale war against the Concord. The tide had turned, and the once mighty empire of the Concord now found itself on the defensive. But even as Earth and its allies gained ground, the Concord were not idle. They regrouped, recalibrated, and adapted. The destruction of the Syrax was a severe blow, but the Concord still held an overwhelming advantage in terms of resources and sheer firepower. Desperation crept into their ranks, and in their desperation, they began to consider a final, terrifying option, an option they had kept hidden for centuries. The Concord had developed a doomsday weapon, a device of unimaginable power capable of destroying entire planets. They had never needed to use it. Until now. If the resistance continued to grow, if humanity and its allies pushed further into the heart of the Concord Empire, the weapon would be unleashed. It would erase Earth from existence, and with it, the last hope of rebellion across the galaxy. The weapon, known as Oblivion, was housed within a fortress-like station orbiting the planet Atrox, located in the dead zone of the galaxy. It was a place few knew about, and fewer still had ever seen. The Concord had taken every measure to keep its existence secret, even from the other alien races they subjugated. If Oblivion was activated, it would rip through entire star systems, collapsing them in a matter of hours. It was the ultimate weapon of annihilation, a weapon of last resort. The human resistance, now allied with multiple alien factions, knew that if the Concord were allowed to use Oblivion, the galaxy would be lost. Earth's very existence would be erased, and the Concord would once again reign supreme. There was no time to waste. They had to strike before the weapon could be deployed. The Alliance, led by Commander Elena Brooks and Corel telepath Alia, prepared for a bold, high-risk mission. Their target, the heart of the Concord's power, the Oblivion Station. To destroy it, they would have to infiltrate deep within enemy territory, past fleets of Concord warships, and through layers of defenses unlike any they had ever encountered. It would be a suicide mission, but it was the only option. The human fleet, now bolstered by forces from the Corel, Varnusian, and many other oppressed species, began the long journey toward Atrox. Along the way, the resistance forces encountered waves of Concord counterattacks. The alien empire, unwilling to let go of their iron grip on the galaxy, threw everything they had at the rebellion. But Earth's forces, tempered by years of struggle, fought back with a ferocity that even the Concord had never anticipated. Despite the overwhelming odds, the resistance pressed on, guided by one simple truth. They were no longer fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for the freedom of the entire galaxy. They had awakened a sleeping force, an alliance that was stronger than the Concord could ever understand. As the fleet approached Atrox, the full scope of the Concord's might was revealed. A massive armada stood guard over the planet, its weapons pointed directly at the approaching ships. It was a do-or-die moment. The resistance would have to break through this final line of defense to even have a chance at reaching the Oblivion Station. Helena stood on the bridge of the flagship, her face set with grim determination. This is it. We've come too far to turn back now. Everyone on me. The fleet charged forward, the sounds of battle echoing in their ears. The starry expanse became a chaotic whirlwind of laser fire and explosions as human ships, alongside their allies, clashed with the might of the Concord's forces. The battle for Atrox was unlike any they had fought before, fierce, relentless, and unforgiving. In the midst of the battle, Commander Brooks and her elite team, led by Alia, made their way into the heart of the enemy's fortress. Time was running out. They had to reach Oblivion before it was too late. With every passing minute, the stakes grew higher. The fate of Earth and the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. The resistance had fought for so long, had endured so much, and now it all came down to one final desperate push to destroy the weapon that could erase them from existence. As they neared the station, the sound of distant explosions filled the air. The galaxy was holding its breath. Would humanity be able to strike the fatal blow to the Concorde's power, or would the doomsday weapon be unleashed, erasing everything in its wake? The answer would come soon enough. The final assault on Oblivion Station was like no battle the galaxy had ever seen. The Resistance fleet, now a unified coalition of humans and their alien allies, fought their way through the last line of defense, each ship willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to end the Concorde's reign. But the true battle, the one that would determine the galaxy's fate, was not fought in the cold expanse of space. It was fought within the heart of the enemy's stronghold. As Commander Elena Brooks and her elite team of resistance fighters infiltrated the depths of Oblivion Station, every step was met with resistance. The station, a marvel of Concorde engineering, was designed not just as a weapons platform, but as a fortress. Its labyrinthine halls were filled with traps, automated defense systems, and elite soldiers who would rather die than let the station fall. But Elena's team was prepared. Led by the Corel telepath Alia, they cut through the enemy's defenses like a blade through paper. Their movements were swift, calculated, and lethal. As they pressed forward, Alia's psychic abilities helped shield them from detection, allowing them to slip past sentries and disable key systems. They were close, closer than they had ever been. Approaching the core, Elena's voice echoed over the comms, steady but filled with urgency. "We don't have much time. Get ready." The heart of the Oblivion Station was a vast control room, a place where the ultimate weapon, the Concorde's doomsday device, was held. It was there that the fate of the galaxy would be decided. The control room was heavily guarded, but the Resistance had one last advantage: surprise. As they burst into the chamber, the Concorde forces, shocked and disoriented, attempted to counterattack. But they were no match for the speed and precision of the Resistance. With explosive charges planted at key junctions, the room was quickly secured. Alia's mind reached out to the central core, her telepathic powers tapping into the station's network. "I can feel the weapon," she said, her voice strained. "It's primed. If we don't deactivate it now, it will launch in minutes. We need to shut down its core systems, or we'll all be wiped out." The team worked in unison, each member handling a different part of the operation. Elena and her team fought off the remaining Concorde soldiers, while Alia, using her telepathic link, reached deep into the station's systems, trying to override the fail-safes that would trigger the weapon. Sweat dripped down her brow as she pushed herself to the limit, her mind connecting with the cold, alien machinery that controlled the station. Seconds stretched into eternity. The pressure was unbearable. With every passing moment, the countdown to destruction continued, and the chances of success seemed to dwindle. But the Resistance had made it this far. They had never given up. They couldn't now. Then, with a final, forceful push, Alia's mind broke through the last barrier. The Oblivion device, a weapon capable of destroying star systems in an instant, went silent. The countdown stopped. "We did it," Elena's voice rang out through the comms. "It's deactivated. We've won." But there was no time to celebrate. The Concorde's response was immediate. The remaining fleet, sensing the failure of their last line of defense, descended on the station with all the fury of a cornered animal. The battle outside Oblivion was only just beginning. "Retreat," Elena commanded. "Get to the ships now." As the team made their way back to their vessels, the station began to crumble around them, its inner workings torn apart by the violent counterattack. The Resistance fleet had done their job. They had stopped the weapon, but now they had to escape with their lives. The final battle for the galaxy was not yet over, but the destruction of Oblivion was a deep blow to the Concorde's power. They could no longer threaten the galaxy with their doomsday weapon. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, to fight, and to survive against impossible odds. The destruction of Oblivion proved that. As the Resistance fleet fled Atrox with the remnants of the Concord's forces in hot pursuit, the message was clear. The tide had turned. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of, and the Concord could no longer deny the truth. The age of their dominance was over. In the aftermath of the battle, the Resistance stood victorious. Earth had not only survived the alien conquest, but it had sparked a revolution that would spread throughout the galaxy. The enslaved races, who had once looked to the stars in fear, now looked toward a new dawn, one where they were no longer subjects to a tyrannical empire, but free beings with the power to shape their own destinies. Humanity, having taken its place as a beacon of hope in the galaxy, would no longer simply be a part of the universe. They would lead it. And as the stars above Earth began to shine brighter than ever before, the promise of a new age was born. The war was far from over, but Earth's victory had marked the first true step toward a galaxy where freedom, unity, and the strength of the human spirit would reign supreme.